How to use the mineral identification gizmo. You're going to want to make sure that you have the practice activity and feel free to pause the video at any time to fill anything in. You also want to make sure you have the mineral ID key. You're going to want to put this in Notability because you'll need it today and probably for several other days too. Now let's take a look at our gizmo. It says a mineral is a naturally formed crystal. You can identify a mineral by its properties. In the mineral identification gizmo, under Choose Property to Test, we're going to start with density. You want to make sure that your screen looks just like this for the mineral identification gizmo. You also want to make sure that you have that practice activity ready to go. We're going to look at mass. It's the amount of substance in an object. Drag the mineral sample onto the balance. You're going to go to the drop-down menu and you're going to choose density. Measure mass with a scale and volume with a graduated cylinder. Also remember that density is mass divided by volume. Now you're going to take sample A and carefully put it on the balance and record what the mass is. Notice the mass is 36.4 grams. We're going to take this number and we're going to add this to our document. Now we're going to talk about volume. Volume is the amount of space an object takes up. The volume is measured by how much the water rises in a graduated cylinder. Remember, we called this the displacement method. So we're going to drag the mineral into the graduated cylinder. You don't want to drop it in from the top. That's not going to work. You're going to have to sort of place it in the bottom. And once you do, the water rises and it gives you the volume. But the nice thing is you don't actually have to do the calculations. It does it for you. So now all we have to do is take it over to our document and fill it in. Now that we have our mass and volume, we can calculate density. Density is a measure of how light or heavy it is. To find the density, divide the mass by the volume. And remember, calculators are recommended. So first we're going to take our mass, which is 36.4 grams, and we're going to divide that by the volume of 14 milliliters. That gives us a density of 2.6 grams per milliliter, and we're going to record that on our sheet. Now we move on to section A. We want to make sure that we are back to our appearance on our drop-down menu, and we're using sample A. Here you can observe the luster, the color, and the crystal shape. We're going to start with our question. What properties allow us to identify minerals? Minerals are made of atoms in a repeating pattern and often form crystals. The shapes of crystals can help identify the mineral. Luster is the way a mineral's surface reflects light. There are many ways to describe luster, and 4 examples are shown. Color can sometimes be a useful way to identify a mineral, but it's not always reliable. So first we're going to record the color right here where it says sample A. Now we're going to go and look at luster. When you're looking at luster, you're looking at how shiny or how the light reflects off of it. The easiest way to do this in the gizmo is just to take the sample and just lightly drag it over the different samples. The one that it matches with is the word that you use to describe the luster, and you'll record that on your paper. Now we're going to look at density. Luckily, we've already calculated density, so all you have to do is look in the first part of the paper to find it. The next test is the hardness test, so you're going to want to select hardness in the drop-down menu. Hardness is a measure of how easily a mineral can be scratched. It is measured on a scale of 1 to 10 called Mohs scale. If a mineral scratches a fingernail with a hardness of 2.5, but not a penny, which is 3.5, its hardness is 3 because it's between 2.5 and 3.5. So we're going to drag sample A across the test objects and see what it scratches. And then we're going to calculate its hardness. So we're going to do it with sample Z just to practice. Remember, a harder mineral will always scratch a softer mineral. So we're going to take sample Z and we're going to scratch it against the fingernail and the penny and the glass and the steel plate and see which one it scratches. Notice it did scratch the fingernail and it did scratch the penny, but it did not scratch the glass or the steel plate. So we know that this mineral is harder than a penny, which is a 3.5, so it's got to be somewhere around a 4, but it's softer than the glass, which is a 5.5, so it's at least a 5. So the only thing we know for certainty is that it's somewhere in between a 4 and a 5. Next, you're going to select the streak test from the drop-down menu. The streak is the color of a mineral's powder. You can observe the streak by rubbing the mineral across a tile called a streak plate. Drag the mineral across the streak plate. What color is the streak? Now note, if the mineral is harder than the streak plate, which is about a 6.5, it's not going to leave a streak. So if that ever happens, instead of recording a color, you're going to write no streak. Now let's test the streak of sample Z. We're going to rub it up against a streak plate and see what color the streak is. You would assume it would be yellow or a greenish color, but when you do it, it's white. So that's why it's important to always do the streak test, because it's a really good property to test. Now we're going to look at whether it reacts to acid or not. Some minerals cause hydrochloric acid to bubble and to fizz. So you're going to choose Acid Test in the drop-down menu and drag the eyedropper of acid over to the mineral and see if it fizzes. We're going to do a couple of samples so you know what the difference looks like. We'll use the hydrochloric acid on sample X, and notice no fizzing and no bubbling. So then we're going to try sample Y. And be patient, the eyedropper can get a little tricky. As you can see here, nothing's coming out. So we have to try a couple more times. Third time's the charm, and with a drop, we see bubbling and we see fizzing. The last thing we need to do is identify our mineral. Look at the mineral key, which you've already downloaded to Notability. Find a mineral that has properties that match sample A. Type the name under mineral name in the Gizmo and press Submit. It may take several guesses to get it right. Now my suggestion, start with density. All minerals have a specific density. On this paper it may not look that way because they've rounded to the nearest tenth, but all minerals have a unique density. So if you start there, when you find a match, you can then see if the rest of the properties match. Now go back to the top left-hand corner and type in the name of what you believe the mineral is and hit Submit. See if you're right, and if you are, record it on your paper. Good luck, and don't forget to submit your practice activity when you're done.